as with all things, I think we're called to strive, but when that thing becomes the essence of our satisfaction, our security, and our significance, then it is possible that that thing has become an idol. People tend to avoid usually because of fear. They may avoid because of doubt. They may avoid because of trauma in their lives. And because of the doubt, the fear, the trauma that's in their lives, that is what's causing them to avoid. They may avoid relationships. They may avoid a ton of things. So I think...
Hi, I'm Hannah, and I'm a creative and curious person who loves asking questions about God, the Bible, and relationships.
And I'm James. I'm a pastor, I'm a counselor, I'm a university professor, and I love helping people find God's solutions to life's problems.
And this is Dad, I Have a Question. So I have asked the question, do I have the gift of singleness? And I wonder, and I'm sure many of you who are single have asked yourself the same question. And so I just wanted to talk to Dad about that because he knows a lot about the Bible and what exactly that means. So today we'll be discussing the gift of singleness. Okay, so let's just start with, what is the gift of singleness?
I think that's a great question. I think I would say that it is God-given ability to remain unmarried, but be contented with that. Feeling a sense of purpose and peace in the midst of their singleness.
Okay. Yeah. Where in the Bible does it talk about the gift of singleness?
So in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, it says this: "Now as a concession, not as a command, I say this. I wish that all were as I am myself, but each has his own gift from God." So, it does talk about the word gift when it talks about this, one of one kind and one of another. So Paul, prior to that, is talking about marriage. He's talking about some principles of marriage, and he's talking about the fact that to keep someone from falling into sexual temptation, if they cannot manage those desires, they should marry. But he wished that all were like himself, single. And he'll talk a little bit later in the chapter as to why he thinks singleness is an important gift. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So I want to make a whole video on 1 Corinthians 7 because I think it's so interesting, because Paul seems, to me, when I've read it, so adamant that maybe it's better to be single. So I want to make a video talking about that with Dad. But today we're just going to be talking.
She's giving me a heads up now,
yes.
So she's letting me know.
So subscribe and stay tuned if you're interested in that. And please comment down below if you have any questions about this topic, or any comments, or questions for later videos that we'll do. Is singleness, the gift of singleness, temporary or lifelong when it's given to you? So if you have it, if God has given you the gift, is it going to last forever, or is it just right now it's a gift and then you'll get married? I don't know.
Right. That's good. Can I say both?
Yeah.
I almost wonder, and I can't think about a passage that I could back this up on. But I do think that there are times that God gives the maybe temporary level of a gift for specific ministry and for a specific purpose. We could see that in other giftings. So I wouldn't be surprised if you couldn't see that in singleness, that maybe for a period of time, let's say somebody's going to go on the mission field, or there was some type of ministry that God wanted them to be undivided with and focused on, and that having a family would be a distraction, that God could give that person that gift of singleness maybe for a period of time, and then after that, open them up to the possibility of marriage. There are a number of people that I know that don't get married until they're late 30s, 40s, 50s, and even later, and they've spent the prior years of their life in ministry. So so I think it's probably both. And then I think that there's some people that have that gift and they will never get married because they've had that gift, and that's something that God has ordained in their lives.
Is it a gift if you are content? in being single? And do you not have the gift if you're not content? Let's just start with that question.
So let's start with that question. I think that discontent is a struggle for all of us. Even if you're in a ministry that is very clear, if you're in a calling or in a lifestyle that is very clear that God wants you in this pattern, and then there are times that we just get discontented. So I wouldn't want to give the impression that somebody who is single and has the gift of singleness is going to be content all the day long. I mean, of course not. They can struggle. And so the areas of the temporary times of discontentment can be there. I think the struggle would be if a person has long-term discontentment with this and is really struggling with being alone and feeling issues of loneliness in their lives and those kind of things. That would be something, and really longing to have a spouse and longing to have children. I would say that they probably don't have. And then also struggling, as Paul talked about in 1 Corinthians 7, with sexual impurity. I would say that person probably doesn't have the gift.
Okay. Because to me, like I've always, when I've done like my research about this topic, I know that there are people out there who just never have the desire to be married.
Sure.
And so I always like assumed reading 1 Corinthians that Paul had that same desire. Like he wasn't really interested in marriage. So I figured them being a Christian, never having the desire to be married, that's the people who have the gift. Everyone else is kind of like...
Yeah, and I think that is a wonderful opportunity for them, that they have a gift and that they really are never tempted in any other way. That's wonderful, but that's just not most human beings.
But that's why it's a gift, maybe.
Maybe, but I think that a lot of people have a lot of gifts that at times, because of sin or insecurities, fears, doubts, that they can question whether they should continue in that gift. And continue in that ministry, continue in those opportunities. So I wouldn't want to give the impression that contentment is absolute and total. Okay. I think that for the most part, it would be something that would be more pure, more norm in their life, that they would have that level of contentment. But discontentment, when they would have a small periodic times of discontentment, doesn't mean that they don't have the gift.
Okay. Or I think I've heard of like missionary stories and stuff.
Sure.
Where who was it? Maybe Amy Carmichael? No, or it could be Gladys Howard. But she wanted to be married. Okay. And then after like praying to God, she was in ministry, really devoting herself to the Lord. She realized her desire for marriage slowly dissipated. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And so ultimately, I think she believed she never got married. She had the gift of singleness. So I wonder if God can also do that. Like
absolutely.
Slowly just change your heart towards, because that's ultimately what God is doing, and that's what we want to pray for, is that God will make us have his desires for
Correct.
Our life. So
yeah, absolutely. So sure, a person can have this longing. Desires are not always evil. But desires are not always good.
Yeah.
And desires are not always, it talks about the fact that praying, God will give you the desires of your heart. And some people take that verse out of context and they'll just say, well, just because I have the desire, God's going to give it to me.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes God's not. And we talked about that in one of the earlier podcasts, that as a loving father, just because the child wants this thing, God knows what is better for the child. And he may say no. Right. He may say, wait. He may say, I do have a spouse for you, but maybe 20 years from now. Or he may say, no, right now, I'm going to give you this gift for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. Can someone know that they have the gift of singleness?
I think yes and no. I think it's true with a lot of gifts. I think that people are gifted in a certain area and they may not realize it. And I think it's other people in their lives that will encourage them and let them know that I could see that gift in your life. I almost wonder if, like this person you were talking about, this missionary, did she know that she had the gift of singleness? Apparently not initially, but then it became apparent to her after time. So I do think that there are times that some people will know for certain they have a gift in this area, or any area. And then I think in other times it will take other people around them to encourage them. But I also think that there are times that it just will come out in long-term plans, that God will show them that their life has been single, but it's also been fruitful, and that God has used them in amazing ways that he would not have been able to if they were married. So
we kind of talked about this, but can you have the gift of singleness but not ever want to be single?
Can you have the gift of singleness and never want to be
Like you
single?
always wanted to get married, even until you like get old. Is that still a gift, even if you just end up single?
I'm not sure how to answer the question very
Yeah.
honestly. So I do think there are some people that have been gifted with certain things, but because of sin and rebellion in their own heart and life, they want to walk away from that particular gifting.
Right.
I've known of people that have pushed their way into the ministry when it's been pretty clear that God was not ordaining they go into the ministry, but they wanted to do it nonetheless. I've known people that have jumped through hoops to get a baby when it looked like it was pretty clear that God was not going to give them one, but they were going to try to figure out a way to get a baby. And as with all things, I think we're called to strive, but when that thing becomes the essence of our satisfaction, our security, and our significance, then it is possible that that thing has become an idol. And that would be a concern.
Yeah.
So.
In answering the question, you're saying that they could have the gift but not do it well. Like not do it well doesn't sound very good, but like handle the gift well, like accept it type thing.
Yeah, I think that that's probably true for a lot of gifts. It's not what's supposed to happen. We're supposed to, as you were talking about this, that our desires should be matured and completed in a desire for Christ. But there are people that are going to continue to struggle because of sin in their own lives, with doing the thing that God wants them to do. I think of Jonah. Now, it's not about singleness, but Jonah, if you remember the story, Jonah was called to be a missionary to Nineveh. Jonah was called to preach the good news to these people. Jonah jumped off a boat to avoid that. Jonah got swallowed up by a big fish. God brought that big fish and spit him up on the land and says, go and do what I want you to do. Then Jonah went and did it. And then when he did it, these people came to faith, and he's grumbling under a tree. So he had been clearly given the gift of evangelism, if you want to call it that. And God used him in amazing ways, but
He
didn't always want to do it. Mm-hmm. So,
would you say that the desire for marriage is a desire from God?
Sure, it can be. As we were talking about before, I think that a person can have a gift of marriage, of a desire for marriage, and I think a person can have a gift of singleness. Now, Paul talked about the benefits of not getting married for some who are going to give their lives wholeheartedly to God, to Christ, and to his work, and to building his church. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a beauty in marriage. And God is the one. Marriage is not man-made. I know that we're struggling with that today, but marriage is not man-made. Marriage is right there in the Garden of Eden, and that as God is creating this world, he creates man, and he says the very first thing, when there was not even sin in this world, he said, it is not good that man be alone. That's before sin was ever in this world, and God created a woman for man. And so, absolutely, that was a gift that God gave Adam, and it's a gift that God continues to give over the centuries to millions of people. And the gift of not only marriage, but bringing other human beings into this world and other people that can come and hear the good news of God's gospel and come and become part of the bride of Christ and the church of Christ. So, so it's a wonderful gift. So I think that people can have both gift of marriage and gift of singleness.
So in saying that, this is hard, I'm sorry, but if God gives us the desire for marriage, why would he allow someone to have the desire for marriage but have the gift of singleness? Like, end up single. Why would God do that?
Well, because God allows freedom of our will. And so if your question is God putting the desire for marriage and putting the desire for singleness or the gift of singleness in the person's heart? No, I don't believe that. I think that God has, if he gave them the gift of singleness, he gave them the gift of singleness. That person then has desires, but desires are things that we have to at times subjugate and bring down and crucify. Jesus says that we need to deny ourselves, take up our cross daily and follow him. So God doesn't remove all desires from our lives. Sometimes he gives desires. He allows us to have desires, but he says that these desires need to be crucified. These desires need to be put aside.
Even if it's a godly desire?
Well, it's only a godly desire if God has ordained it for you.
So, for instance, let's say I never get married.
Sure.
Okay? You had the desire for marriage.
Yes.
And you got married.
Right.
Do you think God put that desire for marriage on your heart? Like when he created you, when he formed you, he created you and he knew that you'd have the desire for marriage. He put that on your heart.
I think that God ordained that I did not have the desire, the gift of singleness. And in not giving me the gift of singleness, that was opening me for the door of the beauty of marriage. But you're saying, would God give a desire for marriage and at the same time give a gift of singleness? I don't know if I would say that God would give the desire for marriage. The person may choose to have that desire for marriage, just like your missionary person that you were talking about. They would probably look around and see a number of people and say, oh, I would like to possibly be married. And then over time, they realized, no, you know what? I had been always given the gift of singleness. I was never going to get married. So they had a desire. They chose to continue to live in a godly way, but they chose to continue to live in a godly way, and the gift was made clear. I think sometimes gifts are not always clear initially. I think that gifts are at times made clear over time. Especially fruitfulness, like this missionary you're talking about. I would assume that they had a fruitful ministry because of their singleness. And that fruitfulness was one of the telltale signs that the path that they were on was a path that God had ordained and also gifted them for.
Yeah. How can I know that I'm avoiding relationships versus being called to singleness?
Okay.
Because I've heard many people, they were like, before I was married, I was like, I'm called to singleness. And they were like, swearing off, and then eventually when they actually grew their relationship with God, they're like, oh, maybe I am supposed to be married, and they end up getting married. So how can we know that we're doing that?
Okay, so I think I would start with the avoidance piece. We see this in counseling a lot. People tend to avoid usually because of fear. They may avoid because of doubt. They may avoid because of trauma in their lives. And because of the doubt, the fear, the trauma that's in their lives, that is what's causing them to avoid. They may avoid relationships. They may avoid a ton of things. So I think I would start there. Is what's in their heart driving them? Is it fear? Is it doubt? Is it trauma that's dealing with that? I believe that the calling, like a calling of singleness or a calling of marriage or a calling into ministry, produces peace and purpose in the person's life. That they recognize their purpose and they recognize and they have peace. Doesn't mean that they always understand have peace. Peace can feel like it goes up and down at times, but I think those would be the big pieces of the puzzle. And part of what we do in counseling as well is we look at root and fruit. In God's word, he talks often about what is the fruit that is being produced in the person's life, and then the root system that is driving it. And so if I'm looking and I'm seeing constant fruit that looks like bad fruit, I would say that there is potentially a bad root that is there. So in counseling, we don't just look at the surface, we peel down to try to get to what's going on underneath the surface. Right. And I think in this case, for this type of person, I would want to try to pull down underneath, look at the fruit that's in their life, pull down underneath. And if it's being driven by, I don't want to get married because trauma, maybe they grew up in a home where they saw their parents with a very bad marriage and they say, I don't want to get married, then their desire to not get married is really probably not a gift of singleness. It's more of a fear of what happened from their past.
Yeah. What are the benefits of being single biblically? Like from the Bible, what does it say about that?
Yeah, so I was holding this passage open in 1 Corinthians 7. Paul had just talked about whether we should stay married or not in a marriage where we are with a non-believer. And then in verse 32, he says this, I want you to be free from anxiety. The unmarried man is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to please the Lord, but the married man is anxious about worldly things, how to please his wife, and his interests are divided. And the unmarried or betrothed woman is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to be holy in body and spirit, but the married woman is anxious about worldly things, how to please her husband. I say this for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint upon you, but to promote good order and to secure your undivided devotion to the Lord. So what Paul was arguing is this. Once again, not that marriage is bad and not that having a family is bad, but inevitably, when you have a wife or a husband and you have children, you're potentially going to have a divided focus because you need to protect and promote and please them, and that may distract you from making your primary focus your ministry to God.
Right.
And so Paul saw one of the benefits as a person can find their life's purpose in serving God and serving others. They're going to go through life without the distractions, perhaps, and that they're not going to be as easily divided.
Yeah.
So I think those would be, and you would have a greater opportunity to be able to serve many people.
Yeah.
I come home every night. I'm here with my wife and my kids every night. What would happen if I didn't have that responsibility? I guess I could be out connecting. I could probably go across the world. They're unhindered in that. So, yeah.
So how can I and others who are still single honor God?
Okay, so I guess I tend to think of life as a stewardship, and stewardship is a biblical term, and it means to hold on to the possession of another, and then to either hold on to it and then give them back to them, or to invest it, to do more. And so I would say that for a single person, and it's true for everybody, you have time, you have talents, and you have treasures. So I would encourage a single person to use their time for opportunities to be able to serve God and others, their talents. It depends on what their talents are. And they may, like we've had a person from our church make us a meal because we're going through a health crisis in our family. And they took their time and they took their talents to provide a meal for us. The treasures can be money, but the treasures could also be like the meal that is there. So I think that would be one. I think I would encourage a person going through a time of singleness to go through spiritual growth. Developing healthy relationships as well. God did not create us to be islands. He created us to be in relationship. And that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a marriage relationship, but a relationship with other people. I think that would be huge. And then also just keeping themselves pure. and making sure that they are grounding themselves in God's word and not straying into immorality or any unfaithfulness.
So now we're on to the story time part of this video. And I just wanted to share a little bit about me because I can relate to this topic. And basically, I think I've been through a lot with this, like dealing with singleness, going through times of not being content and frustration and like confusion and all this stuff. And I think the main way that I've gotten through it every time is just turning to God and giving those hurts and like confusion and discontentment to God and being like, just explaining it to him. And I think also what helps in situations, it doesn't even have to be singleness. It can be like anything of discontent, being like, God, I'm really upset about this. Please help me right now to not feel this way. And I would say God, like, usually helps pretty fast. As long as you just explain to him and just say, like, help me to not feel this way. Just turning to your Bible, reading the Bible, listening to worship music has always helped a lot. Just like going to him in prayer in all those times. And then also trusting God with your future and being like, God, like, I desire this, but if this is not what you desire for me, help me change my heart, grow my heart towards what you desire for my life. And even though I still desire it, it's still, I can make it like, well, I gave this to God, so he will change my heart if he wants to. And he's in control of all things. And yeah, that's what I've
That's
done.
good. Yeah. It reminded me of that quote that we talked about in one of the earlier podcasts. Christian contentment, it's Jeremiah Burrow. It goes, Christian contentment is sweet, inward, gracious frame of spirit that freely submits to and delights in God's wise and fatherly disposal in every condition. Yeah. And so it's the Christian contentment is sweet. It's not bitter. It's inward. It's not based on what's happening around you. It's quiet. It's not riling up our spirit, and it's based on the gospel, gracious frame of spirit, and it's freely submitting to, but then it's also delighting in God's plan, his wise and his fatherly disposal, that God is all-knowing, but he loves us as well, fatherly disposal, he cares for us. And that may be true for you in a time of singleness, as it is for you now, at least in this period. Yeah.
So now we're into Dad, Let's Talk.
Okay.
Our fun segment of today. And this one's called Who Did They Marry? So we're each going to do like a Bible trivia type thing where we have to guess a spouse of a certain Bible character. So the name of their spouse. All right. Do you want to go first? Or do you want me to?
I want you to go first. So let me make sure I've got it right. Who did they marry? So like, let's pick, well, I don't want to pick anyone because I don't want. Okay, so I've got to pick somebody.
A Bible character, and I have to guess who they married.
Am I trying to stump you?
Yeah, like this is a trivia type thing.
Okay.
But like, don't go too hard.
Don't go too hard. Yeah, see,
I'm not that smart. Okay.
If I go very, so you may do that to me as well.
No, mine is. I feel like mine is pretty easy.
All right, so let me try this one. This guy went by the name Xerxes, or King Ahasuerus, from the Bible. He had 2 wives. Can you give me at least one of them?
Esther.
Okay, all right. So that probably was too easy
that
for you.
Was
That's
way too easy.
You don't have the other one?
Huh?
You don't have the other one, huh?
No.
Queen Vashti.
Oh, Vashti.
Right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the one who didn't say, I'm not going in front of all those guys. That's right.
I could have got that one.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Now let's see if I can get this one.
Mine is, who was Hosea's wife?
Hosea's wife. It's a really interesting name. It really is. I don't think I've ever heard a woman's name Gomer. Gomer Pyle. No, not.
I always thought it was like Gomar, but then
Maybe.
when I looked it up, it's ER.
ER, yeah.
So I'm like, oh, maybe it is Gomer.
Gomer, yeah. That's a interesting story. Talking about God ordaining a marriage that was going to be a mess, but he was going to use that marriage as an example of how we are towards him.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it's actually favorite book. So thanks for giving me a softball one there. You didn't realize, but that was a softball.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. I was like,
So.
all right, guys, that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching and listening. If you're listening on podcasts, please like and subscribe if you like this video, and comment down below if you have any comments about this, if you have any questions for future videos. And please follow us on all our social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and podcasts, and subscribe and all the things.
All those things?
Yeah. All right. We'll see you next Wednesday.
All right, be blessed. Thank you again for being with us. Take care.
Bye.